We are. Hello, I'm Sharon Noble, Director of the Coalition to Stop Smart Meters here in BC. Over the last few years, I've been interviewed quite a few times by Citizens Forum in an ongoing effort to educate people about smart meters, cell towers, Wi-Fi, and other wireless devices in an effort to spread the word. Um, Many people these days are using these convenient gadgets without knowing truly the harmful effects that they're being exposed to. The electromagnetic waves, the microwave radiation that's emitted, um, is being hidden from the public due to advertising and ineffectual government agencies. It's important that we try to spread the word through citizens forums and other agencies like this because this is just about the only way we're able to these days. Today, I'm playing host for the very first time to continue the discussion with Cece Doucette, who's the director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology. Among other things, she has many hats on these days. She's become very active and is an important advocate for safer schools as well as an educator who has graciously accepted our invitation to discuss the issue of wireless or microwave radiation. Welcome, Cece. I'm
Thank,
so very grateful that you're here today. And I know and hope that you're going to tell us what your experiences have been so that we can try to adapt and use them in our experiences here in Canada and British Columbia. Would you like to tell us? I'm sorry. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved?
sure. How much time do we have?
Well, initially, we're going to have 14 minutes
Okay.
for a citizens forum, and then as long as we want, and the rest will be put on YouTube and shared with people.
Okay, super. Well, I had no idea there was anything that could be questioned about today's wireless technology until I had spent years in my local public school district here in Massachusetts, bringing in technology because we kept hearing about this 21st century classroom. And then one night at book group, a girlfriend of mine who's an electrical engineer tipped me off that there actually could be biological effects. So I'm a technical and professional writer by trade. So I just started looking at the peer reviewed, non industry funded scientific literature. And I was simply astounded that there are literally thousands of credibly published studies showing very serious biological harm. And so I worked with my public school district. I sent them study after study, and it wasn't easy. It was not an easy conversation to have because all of our schools have been told by industry that our kids need all this technology to succeed in life. But when they read the legal fine print that comes with their devices, they had an aha moment because in the legal fine print, if anybody watching today happens to have an iPhone, I would welcome you to take it out and go into settings. And once you're in settings, scroll down just a little ways and hit general. From general, go all the way down to the bottom to legal and regulatory and hit that. Once you do, from settings, general, then legal and regulatory, you come up with a little list at the top. And 4 or 5 down, it says RF exposure, which is this radio frequency radiation or two-way microwave radiation that is emitted. And that legal fine print tells us all a couple of really important things that we never knew were there. One, it says this device was tested at a distance from the body, so don't put these things on your body. And 2, use a hands-free option because without coming right out and telling us, one device like a cell phone now has 5 or 6 or more antennas with 5G phones that independently, each one separately, pulsing this toxic microwave radiation to make or maintain a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. And how would we know that legal fine print is buried so many layers down into our phone? So when our schools read that legal fine print, they formed a committee and the committee met. And at the end of it, they came up with this little sign called Ashland's Best Practices for Mobile Devices. And it tells us to turn off the device when you're not using it, turn the Wi-Fi on only when needed, because our students and staff are sitting under these wireless access points all day, and they are pulsing industrial strength microwave radiation at our children and our teachers. And then always place a mobile device on a solid surface, not on your body, because the fine print even tells us that, and to keep a distance from whatever device you're using. So that was baby steps in our district. They are still waiting for higher authorities to tell them to actually do the right thing, which is to access even better technology through hardwired connections. And it's not rocket science. Most folks will recognize an Ethernet cable. And who knew that you could buy a little lightning adapter for like 20 or 30 bucks, and you can actually hardwire an iPhone, or you can get a different kind of adapter for an Android phone or a Chromebook, and nobody's giving us this information. So,
Cece, do you know in your schools, did you have fiber optic cable before Wi-Fi?
I believe so. I think that our schools were already hardwired, and then
And our schools were too.
Yeah. So that's the good news, because 90% of it's already done. All they need to do is fix that connection from the wireless access point to the devices. And like I said, you can hardwire a Chromebook, you can hardwire a MacBook, an iPad. It's not rocket science. And then you just go into each device and simply turn off the antennas. And Sharon, what I'd like to do, because if the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us anything, is that we need to be really aware of environmental invisible exposures. And these electromagnetic fields of microwave radiation is a big one. So I would like to give a demonstration of what this invisible toxin looks and sounds like. So this is a scientific device called a radio frequency detection meter. This one is the Safe and Sound Pro 2. It runs for just under $400. But when I turn it on, if there was no radiation in the area, we wouldn't see much happening. But otherwise, we'll see a slight exposure, a moderate exposure, a high exposure, or an extreme exposure. And this range is based on the scientific literature. So in my house, where I've chosen to hardwire and protect my family with safe, even better, faster technology through cables, we see it flashing green. And I'm at a maximum of 1.82 microwatts per square meter. Now what I'm going to do is turn my cell phone on, and as a rule I keep my cell phone in airplane mode, because that disables all of those antennas in there. But my clock still works, my camera still works, anything that's downloaded still works. But it just goes off the charts with radiation.
And that's what people need to see.
Hang on.
Because you can't smell it.
The maximum reading right now, let me turn this noise down. The maximum reading I'm seeing is 39,600 microwatts per meter square. And the goal is to have it under 0.1.
And this stuff isn't visible. You can't smell it. There's no other way, unless you've got an RF meter with you. You don't know where it is. You don't know you're being exposed.
No, you don't. And we're exposing our children. We're exposing our pets. There's study after study explaining how dangerous this is to the environment, to our pollinators, our plants, all of it. And nobody has much of an idea. Hang on, let me turn this back into airplane mode. So
can I ask you, how did you get your school boards to listen to you? We are having a great deal of difficulty here in British Columbia. They're avoiding us. They're avoiding even reading any of the scientific literature that we send them. How did you get them to pay attention?
Well, here's my lessons learned. One, please don't think you can go it alone and raise your hand and they're going to do the right thing. Because time after time after time, we have seen that is not at all what happens. When I raised my voice in our schools, even after our own United States National Toxicology Program came out with a $30 million study that was peer-reviewed by experts all over the world, clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, when I brought that up to our schools after we had gotten this sign, I said, so are we finally going to turn it off? Here's the science that's saying clear evidence from our own government. And our school superintendent, who's a lovely man, a nice guy, a great educator, he just looked at me and said, Cece, you're just one voice. So do not go it alone. What I recommend people do is take advantage of resources that we have today that we did not have 8 years ago when I fell down the rabbit hole of this issue. There is a website called techsafeschools.org that was recently launched by an award-winning environmental group. And if you go out to techsafeschools.org, you will find they started with 3 webinars, and these recordings are now available for anybody to look at. The first one was with a team of attorneys, 6 or 7 attorneys from all across the United States who have been working on the EMF issue for a long time. And unfortunately, it comes down to legal action sometimes to move the needle to safe technology. So there's a good webinar that talks about the legal responsibility, because Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, AM Best, other insurers have long since recognized this radiation as a leading risk, and they don't offer coverage. So our towns don't have coverage unless they are savvy enough to insist that the telecom operators have real insurance. Sometimes there's a shell game that goes on with the insurance companies or the certificates that they produce, and then you go and look and it's a shell company. So
who would be responsible for schools, though, if children are getting sick or if teachers are getting disabled? Who's responsible?
It can be the schools are responsible, because they've allowed this technology in with no safe technology training, and they are not adhering to the manufacturer's fine print warnings. So the schools can be liable for damages.
Do you think that the individual people, like the superintendents or the school boards themselves, could be liable if they are ignoring the evidence that's there before them?
You would have to look at your own laws and hire an attorney who specializes in telecommunications law and interpret that for your own citizens in Canada. But yeah, you know, the industry has known this was coming. They've set aside billions of dollars, from what I've learned, for these lawsuits that are coming up. And there have been many lawsuits already. So unfortunately, it takes a legal nudge sometimes to get our schools and our towns' attention. But then the second webinar that they offered at techsafeschools.org is with the science, and you will hear from leading world scientists and medical doctors about the biological effects, because we know scientifically, you know, we were at epidemic proportions of anxiety and depression in the world, in all of our industrialized nations, even before this pandemic hit. And we know scientifically that this radio frequency radiation is a neurotoxin. It hits the central nervous system especially hard. We know it causes depression. We know it causes anxiety. It leads to suicidal ideation. It causes headaches, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness, cognitive impairment, anger, you know, behavioral issues, all these things we're seeing in our schools that just keep mounting, and nobody is protecting the children from this radiation. So those resources are there, but again, don't go it alone. Get those around you educated first, because one voice can be easily dismissed. And we have excellent tools through TechSafe Schools. And we also have the film Generation Zapped, which was released in 2018. And it in a lovely award-winning way teaches us what this issue is about. It's only 74 minutes. I know here in the US, if our local libraries subscribe to services called Canopy with a K or Hoopla, that the Generation Zapped film is part of those collections, and people can just go through their library card and watch this award-winning film.
Good idea.
Yeah, and then have a living room party with your friends, with your kids' parent, the parents of the kids that your kids hang out with or your grandchildren hang out with. Get everybody together and start getting them educated, because once you have a group of well-informed, motivated citizens, you can move mountains, but don't go it alone.
Yeah.
And then
is that what your group is doing? Your Massachusetts for Safe Technology?
Yes, and I've been so fortunate. I thought I was the only one figuring this out. And then I went to the State House here, and there was a forum where Dr. Deborah Davis, who's the founder and chairwoman of the Environmental Health Trust, she brought a panel of world-leading experts to our State House in Massachusetts. And that day, up until then, I didn't have anybody I could talk to about this. I was just doing the deep dive and figuring it out and trying to fix this problem.
We've all done it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was so grateful to go to our State House in Massachusetts for this forum where I met people from all over the state who had figured this out too. People who were up against cell towers in their neighborhood or their community, or people whose loved ones had died from the glioblastomas or the acoustic neuromas or the thyroid cancers or any of the long-term harms. And then others whose children were suffering from electrical sensitivities, or adults who were suffering from this constant bombardment of microwave radiation. So from there, we kind of built a network, and last year we formalized it and set up a website that folks are welcome to look at called Massachusetts for Safe Technology. It's MA, the number 4, safetech.org, MA4safetech.org. And we've got a wealth of information out there that anybody is welcome to look at our resources and kind of launch from there if we can help you with anything.
That's wonderful. There are so many excellent resources, but as you said, it's hard to find them
Yeah.
unless you are very good at digging and researching. I know when I started years ago, there was nobody, and it's wonderful today because there are people, and so many of the experts like yourself are so willing to share of themselves and their time and their expertise, and it makes such a difference.
Well, thank you. And, you know, I stand on your shoulders and all the others who figured this out before me, who have been trying so hard to break through the big tobacco playbook, which the industry deploys. And that's well documented in a report out of Harvard University, their law school Center for Ethics. Free online. You can just type in Harvard captured agency, how the Federal Communications, how the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates.
Yes.
So here in the US, and I suspect it's the same with Safety Code 6 in Canada, there are heavy, heavy industry and political influences and military influences that keep this critical information from getting to the public. So if anything we've put together at Massachusetts for Safe Technology can help people come up to speed. On the resource page, there are links to my personal repository called Understanding EMFs. And being a tech writer, I just started categorizing the information so I could get back and find what I needed to share. And if it's useful to others, please, you are more than welcome to go in there and use that as a launch point.
That's wonderful. Here in Canada, Health Canada is very similar to the FCC, and it is a captured agency. Any of the reviews of the current science is ignored. In fact, Frank Clegg and the Citizens for Safe Technology, and a few of his members, and I did a little bit, they went through primarily the Health Canada website, and the information there is by and large incorrect.
Right.
It's incomplete. And unfortunately, it's the same with the Cancer Society. It's very difficult. The industry has its fingers just about every place.
They do. I've reached out to those federal agencies. I presented down at the National Institutes of Health, and a reporter from the New York Times, I want to say, found out that we were presenting on a panel at the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference. And as you mentioned, Frank Clegg, who founded Canadians for Safe Technology, he's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. And he came and joined our panel to talk about industry and how industry needs a nudge to do the right thing and invest money in research and come up with biologically safe technology if they want wireless. Otherwise, for now, we should always be bringing hardwired technology, perhaps through fiber optics, right to the premises. Don't stop at a pole outside of our homes and then throw up a wireless small cell. Get rid of that small cell infrastructure. Get rid of the cell antennas and just bring the technology right to the house.
And unfortunately, those microcells are what is coming with the 5G.
Yep.
It's
And
going to
they
be
are
getting worse. Yes.
in Boston, we are already just so heavily saturated and people are getting sick. So when this reporter found out that we were talking about EMFs, she came and asked to do a story about it. And the government shut her down. Her editors shut her down. And it was not allowed to be put in the news. And so we used to, at least here in the US, have like 50 mainstream media outlets. Those have been bought up and bought up and bought up. And now they are owned primarily by the parent companies that own the telecom industry. So
Yes.
we need to be very judicious about where we get our information. I was at a school meeting in the town next door with their health committee. And as I was sharing the information, we were sitting around a big conference table, and one of the gentlemen had his iPad. And as I'm speaking, he's validating what I'm saying. And he says, well, look, the New York Times says it's fine, that, there's nothing wrong with 5G. And I said, well, it used to be a credible publication, and that William or Bill Broad, who wrote that article, is a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. But how would you know that the New York Times has a 5G test lab with Verizon at the New York Times? How would you know that they have industry on their board and they are not doing true investigative journalism anymore? And in fact, after the New York Times wrote that article about 5G being just scaremongering by the Russians, which it's not, the Russian scientists have known about this for many years and tried decades ago to warn us not to commercialize this radiation. But the Irish ombudsman called out the New York Times on an ethics flag because they were completely corrupt in reporting that there's nothing wrong with 5G. So
it's really tragic because this information, as you say, has been around for decades.
mm-hmm.
The U.S. military in the 50s and 60s was doing studies. Troy Glacier has provided thousands and thousands of studies that the U.S. Air Force has done.
Yeah.
And yet it's being ignored. And
but it's easily accessible. Go out to Massachusetts for Safe Technology. Look at our resources. I've got a link in there for the military. So again, we want your listeners to be empowered to look for themselves. Don't take our words on any of this, but go learn enough till you get to the point where you want to first protect yourself and your loved ones, and then start using your voice to start informing those around you. Hold these community conversations in your living room and get a good group of citizens together, and then go talk to your town. Go have meetings with your legislators. Go have meetings with your schools. Make sure your federal delegations are involved in the conversation, because I will tell you, I have met with probably hundreds of public servants at our state house. And almost every single one, when I said, can you share with me what you might know about the biological impact of EMFs? Almost to the person, each one said, well, I really don't know very much, but I'd love to hear what you have to say. There was one gentleman who said, I know a little bit, but why don't you share with me what you came to say? And after we spoke for about 40 minutes, he shared with me that his father was the Russian physicist who led the team into Chernobyl after it blew. So he grew up knowing radiation. He was the only one. So my message here is that most people simply do not know. So be fact-based, be calm, be collaborative, and be the kind of person that somebody would like to work through this issue with, because we know it's emotional. When we figure out that we're frying our kids, our pollinators, and our planet, it can be a very emotional experience. So I used to tell my kids when they were upset, go scream into a pillow, and then let's come back and figure out what we need to do. So
well, and what's really hard. What's really hard is the fact that so many of these people are addicted to their machines and their gadgets. Try to talk to someone about the dangers of their cell phone as they're sitting there texting away. It's very difficult.
Well, that's why I love to first, when I open the conversation, the first thing I do is say, hey, do you have an iPhone? And if they do, I walk them right through where that legal fine print is. And then they're looking at it and they're looking at me like, whoa, it tells me right here that this was tested away from the body and not to have it on your body. And people stuck them in their bras. They put them in their waistbands. They put them in their back pockets. They put them in their suit pockets. And lo and behold, we see a doubling and quadrupling of colon and rectal cancers, even among our young adults who have been doing this for years now. And we see breast cancer increases for men and women because the men are storing them in their suit pockets and their shirt pockets, and women are tucking them into their bras. So this is very serious. It's a very dangerous, but it's very easy to learn about. And then to make your personal choices.
You've been very successful in working with your politicians too. You've got several bills that you've got into your legislature.
Yeah. So unfortunately, in Massachusetts, although we lead the nation in the quantity of bills that we have filed, we have 11 right now that are directly sponsored. I think we have 9 more that citizens have brought forth, but we move like molasses in Massachusetts. And I was fortunate to be introduced to a state representative, Patrick Abrami, in New Hampshire. And his constituent, when he went knocking door to door to be reelected, one of his constituents by the name of Deb Hodgson had become ill from this radiation. And like most people who get this illness, she went to her doctor and said, why am I not sleeping? Why am I getting these searing headaches, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness? The doctors would run the tests they know to run and come up empty. So then
can I interrupt? Oh, there. I'd lost your picture. Sorry about that. There, you're back.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. It's, we just roll with the technology. So Deb explained to him that she had to pay thousands of dollars out of pocket to go to specialists, from neurologists to endocrinologists, all the different people who have a part of your body, and nobody could figure out why her health was crashing. And she was getting sicker and sicker until somebody finally recognized her symptoms as microwave sicknesses or electromagnetic illness. And so once she knew, then she could take action. Then she could hardwire all of her technology at work and home, just get little adapters and hook it all up, and then go into the devices and turn off those antennas, and to get a much faster signal. So hardwiring is always going to hands down beat wireless, except for the convenience factor. And then you just need to retrain yourself to only use mobile technology when you have no other choice on the go, and use it for as short a time period as you can until you can get back to your hardwired computer.
And it's also now with all the concern about privacy and security.
Yeah.
That's a major point for many people. I've been trying to point out some of the other things besides health, because so many times you see the raised eyebrows. Mm-hmm. You think, well, did you know that it's safer? Do you know that it's faster?
Yeah.
There are many advantages.
All those signals flying through the air are carrying your data. And with a $100 application, anybody at the curb can be hacking into your private information. That's right. And property values. Having these cell towers anywhere near your house, the real estate literature shows up to a 10 to 20% drop in property values in many cases when there's a cell tower nearby.
Oh, I can tell you it's more than that.
Yeah.
We live near it, and I can tell you it's probably closer to 40 or 50%.
Oh, good Lord.
Just huge decrease in property values.
Right. Well, so Deb Hodgson introduced Representative Abrami to me, and he got in his car with her out of New Hampshire. They drove down to my home in Massachusetts. We sat at my kitchen table for the afternoon, and I helped him to connect the dots. And he is an engineer by trade. And this, of course, goes against everything that our engineers have been taught. They've been taught from the FCC and the industry that you have to have heat from a device. Like if I'm holding this up to my head, in a half an hour, how much heat would it take to raise the temperature of my skin? That's the only testing they ever did. They never tested for biological effects. So our guidelines, the FCC and the international ones that are through the ICNIRP, the International Committee on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, they allow like this much radiation, and the biological science shows the harm is way down here at hundreds of thousands of times below what they're still pulsating out at our population.
Yeah. Well, as Ole Johansson says, as far as he's concerned, there's no safe level of man-made radiation. I mean, life evolved to natural radiation. It is completely different. from the radiation to which we're being exposed to on a daily basis.
Yeah, this man-made radiation is a whole different beast.
Yep.
So Representative Abrami did his own investigation, and he had this major wow moment, like, wow, what are we doing here? And so he wrote a bill, and he culled out, I think it was 8 or 9 questions, and he put them in the bill that demand answers. Why does that fine print say to keep this off the body? Why do the insurers already recognize this as a leading risk and not offer coverage for damages? Why does the FCC ignore the non-thermal, non-ionizing, low-level radiation science that shows clear evidence of harm? Why do they allow hundreds of times more exposure to our citizens in North America than certain other countries do? And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect of every single gadget that we've been sold? Our phones, our baby monitors, our Bluetooth, our Chromebooks, our iPads, our
Wi-Fi, cell towers,
the home security systems, the utility smart meters. We are just getting swamped in this electrosmog. And the FCC regulations say from one device in a half an hour, how much heat will it cause, which has nothing to do with the harm. So Frank Clegg was very gracious. I introduced him to Rep. Abrami, and Frank Clegg flew in for the hearing at the New Hampshire State House. I drove up and testified. Dr. Paul Heroux from McGill University drove down. Again, these guys are doing it on their own time and dime. We all came in and testified alongside many citizens who already understand this issue. And their House Committee on Science, Technology, and Energy listened to our testimony. And then they reported the bill out favorably. It then went over to their Health and Human Services Committee on the Senate side, which is chaired by a medical doctor who co-sponsored the bill because medical doctors are seeing the fallout in their practices. So it was passed by, and I went up and testified again along with others, and it was passed by the Senate. And then it went to Governor Sununu's desk for signature into law, and Governor Sununu signed it into law. All this happened in 7 months' time in New Hampshire.
Wow.
I've been working on bills here for over 8 years, and other bills like our smart meter bill has been around for like 10 years. So I think we are deep in bed with industry in Massachusetts because we are clearly not protecting public health over corporate profits at this point in time. My hope is as this information comes more mainstream, as you and I and everybody listening today builds the grassroots voice, that is where change begins to happen. So I would like to walk your viewers through the New Hampshire report. If I can have our gracious host Norm switch us over to screen sharing. I hope that you can see the New Hampshire General Court Statutory and Study Committees page. Can you see that?
Yes, I can. Yes.
So they did their investigation. They had top people assigned to this commission. They had, I think, 4, maybe 5 engineers, one of whom is the chair. He was at the time the chair at the University of New Hampshire of the engineering and computer, electrical and computer engineering department. And when he was first introduced to this issue, he thought it would be a slam dunk, like, oh, this is fine. Wi-Fi must be fine. He was astounded at what they uncovered in their investigation. They had 2 medical doctors on the commission. They had the State Department of Health. They had the State Attorney General's office. There were 2 seats on the commission for the industry, one from the CTIA, the wireless industry, and then one from the local state level industry representative. So they had excellent, highly credentialed people who could look at the science and determine whether they were being sold a bill of goods by the industry or whether there was actual science showing harm. So what I will do now is show the report. Can you see this State of New Hampshire memorandum?
Yes.
So they spent a year, even during the pandemic. They knew this was important and they did not let their deadline slip. They reported in on November 1st, as they were assigned to do by law. And they presented this report to the leadership in New Hampshire.
For
The
the sake of our time, Cece, I
yeah,
know that we could spend hours just on this important report alone.
yeah.
Is it possible for you to share the recommendations, as
Yes,
they're very important?
absolutely. So although this document is 390 pages, most of that is the appendices with the backup facts. The beauty of the way that Rep. Abrami and his commission decided to set this up is they put all the meat right up front. So this shows you who was on the commission, and then they tell us who they brought in to testify, and we had leading world experts who testified on this. I also want to mention that Dr. Paul Heroux from McGill University, who teaches electromagnetism in the medical school, had a seat on the commission. So we had one of the world's leading scientists on the commission. So right here on page 7, they start with their summary, and what they do is show all these experts who came in and spoke, and all of it is documented in the minutes at the back of the report. And then they say what it was that they were tasked to do. Here's all those wonderful questions that demand an answer. And then they talk about the conflicts of interest that they discovered with our federal agencies who were invited to come and testify and declined to do so. They just kept pointing to these false statements by the captured agencies at our federal level. So that was a huge red flag that our federal government is not protecting the public. And then what they did, as you note, is they made 15 recommendations. We can whip through these pretty quickly, but what they are saying is that we need to get our federal delegation on this, and they need to start coming up with biologically safe standards for radio frequency radiation. And that at the state level, they need to get our state agencies like the Department of Public Health or the Attorney General's office, or perhaps a bunch of them, to start getting information proactively out to the public, put it on their website, but also do public service announcements on radio, television, print media, and the internet, and give these warnings so the public can protect themselves, especially the unborn, the newborns, and young children and pregnant women, because there's so much rapid cellular development that happens, and we know this radiation alters DNA development. The third recommendation is that every single place you put up a cell antenna should have a big sign on it saying what it is, and that people should stay away from this because it's emitting radiation. Schools and public libraries should start migrating away from wireless and start hardwiring. As we buy new equipment, don't buy wireless, buy hardwired technology, and bring the fiber optics right to the premises. So the industry has put all this technology in place with no post-market surveillance. So nobody's saying, where are these really high areas? Where are there perhaps lower areas that might be safer to live in? So they're saying that signal strength measurements must be collected and documented, and that we should have a database where the public can go, enter data as well as gather data to see where safer areas might be. And then establish, again, protocols for measuring the signal strength. And this number 7 is that if they are going to put any kind of a wireless facility in the public access way or on private properties, that each town should have, or the state should have, agreed upon setbacks so that you can't put these right outside people's homes and bedrooms. You can't put them right on a school or on a senior housing facility or on a hospital. We need to get smart about this. And then we need to work with our building inspectors and have them trained so that if you're going out to buy or lease a home, you can hire these inspectors to do a radiation measurement, just like they would measure for mold or for VOCs or formaldehyde. Get them trained to measure the radiation and then document that in a database somewhere. And then they should create maps so that at a glance people can see where the high emissions are, and get the state inspectors to record in that database as well as the public. And then this one's critical. We know there's technology existing today that would stop the phone from radiating when a phone or other wireless device is put up against the body. It would automatically shut the radiation off. So our engineers just have not been tasked to do this and to build it in, but we know that this technology exists and we should all be deploying it. Recommendation 11 is to have a statewide position to bring fiber optics to the premises, not just to a pole outside the building where a wireless facility blasts radiation at us all the time. Bring the high-speed fiber optic right to the building and then just hook up with Ethernet cables indoors. Recommendation 12 is that we still need to continue with the science and we need to start funding the science. We fund very little research here in the United States because the industry has moved into most of our research universities and with their deep pockets have closed down the laboratories that were doing real EMF research. So we need to start training, and fortunately, we now have medical conferences that offer continuing medical education credits. Anybody can go out and look up the EMF Medical Conference 2021 and all of the training that was offered live in January to scientists, to doctors, to nurses, to first responders is all now packaged up and available for anybody to take that training and get continuing medical education credits. So we need to get all of our medical community trained on this. Recommendation 13 is to put warning signs inside the buildings, not just out on the poles, but inside, so people know that there are white zones, radiation-free zones, and that people can't just walk around blasting radiation at everybody around them. So we need to start thinking wisely about how and when we use mobile technology and create safe public spaces where anybody can go and not get harmed. Recommendation 14 is that we need to start protecting our environment, the trees, the plants, the birds, the insects, the pollinators. There is a huge body of scientific peer-reviewed literature that shows that this is killing our insects. It is dysregulating the navigation systems for our birds and bees and other pollinators if it's not outright frying them. It's doing damage to the trees. The industry comes in to put these small cells in at the curb right outside people's homes all throughout our towns, and they are lopping off the trees with no regard for the benefits that they bring to us in our community. So,
and very few people in the media certainly is not connecting the loss
right.
of bees and whatever with RF. You hear about the pesticides,
Yeah.
sure. But
Sure.
once
And
their immune system is weakened by the EMFs,
yeah,
they're more vulnerable to everything.
Exactly. And we've seen studies where if you put a wireless router or a smartphone near a beehive, we've seen the bees come out and swarm. We see anger outbursts in humans when their central nervous system is attacked like that too. So this is real and happening. And, you know, we're all headed toward the extinction list if we don't get ahead of this.
Yeah.
So they're asking at the state level to address the ecological impact. And they're also asking our federal delegations to get on it and get our federal agencies to start addressing this. And there was a lot of good work done years ago, but the industry got in there and got a lot of that defunded. So the way the New Hampshire legislature works is there were 13 members on this commission. 10 of them signed off on the majority report. And then in New Hampshire, if there are others who are not in the consensus, then they are given the opportunity to also file a minority report. And so the 2 members from the industry and 1 senator who just kept pointing to these captured agencies at the federal level, Senator Jim Gray, they signed off instead on this minority report. And this too is something of a gift, because when you look at the 10 pages of the minority report, you'll see in all these references that they give, their playbook, and they're pulling up old science, they're pulling up captured agencies, They'll pull up things from the World Health Organization to make it look like there's no problem here. But what they're not telling you is that's old stuff.
Yes.
You can go out to the World Health Organization and see that in 2020, they reopened their investigation of electromagnetic fields and radio frequency radiation. But we have evidence and studies that show even at the World Health Organization level, there are captured agencies. Who would know? There are two groups at the WHO that look at EMFs. One is heavily industry funded.
And
The
has
other,
been for years
and has been
affiliated.
for years.
Yes.
But what the industry does is they just tell our towns and the public who wants to hear it, oh, it's fine. Look at all these credible resources who say it's fine.
And
People
they love this
say, oh, look,
statement. There's no solid evidence. There's no convincing evidence.
No, and that's
proof.
what happened.
Yes.
In this commission too, you know, they wanted to be fair. They invited the industry in. This Professor Dr. Swanson came in. He's the hired gun from the industry. He gave his information. And when the commission said, please send to us the credible peer-reviewed scientific studies that you talk about that show this is safe, and they never produced anything.
They can't. There aren't
They can't. But they talk a big game, and our towns don't know any different. So our towns keep approving these applications instead of hiring a lawyer who's trained in telecom law and knows that there's 20 different ways that you can put up barriers to make it hard for the industry to just steamroll into your town.
Absolutely.
But who would know? So I would welcome anybody to go and grab this New Hampshire report and at least read the first 17 pages.
Cece, I would say that we probably could have another. I think the time is probably running short here.
I'll do the stop share now. And
I would love to invite you back again because you've got so much more to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
And your experience in developing bills and what's going on in the U.S. as far as the legal side, it's vital for us to know this. And may I, on behalf of Citizens Forum, ask if you would be kind enough to come back again?
I would be honored to do so.
Cece, it has been wonderful. And we thank you so much. Your experience is great. And thank you for everything that you're doing out there to help everyone.
Well, right back at you, Sharon. I know you've been at this much longer than I have, and I know you are a trusted wealth of information in your country as well. So that's the message here, is once you know, it's easy to really look at this issue through the non-industry funded lens, right?
The information is there, and there are many of us who are willing to share it. All people have to do is to ask, and we're there.
Okay, well, let us know what we can do to help. Thank you for this opportunity, and have a tech-safe day.
Thank you so much, Cece, and the very same to you.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.